Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. All right, we're here with Jeff Roberts. He's a personal injury attorney in Calloway County. And Jeff, today we want to talk about paralysis and amputations. And a lot of the cases that you deal with can ultimately lead to that. You do car wreck and truck wreck cases, you do workers' compensation cases, and also Social Security disability type cases. And these are not uncommon for you to see. And I would imagine over your 27 years, you've handled quite a few of these.
I have. Unfortunately, I have had clients who've been paralyzed from their injuries that they've received, some paraplegic, some quadriplegic from the injuries that they've received as a result of a car wreck or a work injury from that standpoint, and also have had represented several clients who've had an amputation of some sort.
Yeah, and it's, it may not actually occur in the incident itself, in the accident itself, but it may be due to a series of surgeries that later on it results in an amputation. But, obviously the extent of these injuries are sometimes job-ending, career-ending. Sometimes, again, there's a pain factor. There's a lot more that wraps up into this than people might imagine. And you as an attorney have to kind of take that into account as you're presenting the case, not only to the other side, to their insurance adjusters and their lawyers, but also to the judge. How do you begin to start address that? What are some of the things that the injured victim, your client, is going to have to start dealing with?
Well, and it depends on the obviously the type of injury. If it's an amputation, of a lower extremity or part of the lower extremity or the upper extremity,
foot or a lower leg.
Yeah, a foot below the knee or an entire leg amputation, or if it's an arm or hand or just parts of fingers, depending on which finger it is, it has a different effect from an occupational standpoint. And obviously, what the occupation of the individual was before comes into play from that standpoint. A surgeon that loses their index finger is going to be substantially more occupationally impaired by that than an attorney who loses their index finger, for instance. So, all of those things come into play in how to deal with it. And with the when you're dealing with those with very, very serious injuries, which obviously those are, those injuries, then you have to take into account and make sure you document the future medical. A lot of times in those type of cases that are that severe of an injury, there's really not a dispute over the past medical. There's not really a dispute that this person who is confined to a wheelchair is now totally disabled. So quantifying those damages may not be as difficult as they are in some other cases. There's still obviously things you have to take care of and make sure you document and get the proper experts. But the sometimes in those type of injuries, one of the biggest items of damages is the future medical treatment that the individual is going to need, and getting the proper experts involved in that. Obviously, the treating doctors in conjunction with life care planners and others to map out what types of treatment that the injured person is likely to expect in the future because of that injury is an integral part of representing that individual and making sure that they get the proper damages that they should be receiving for that injury.
And that's where the experience comes in, knowing who to go to and how to really almost check their numbers and their logic on this as well, because you want to make sure that, again, you're able to do as much as possible for this client, because again, once that agreement is ultimately settled, once that document is signed, there's not a lot of going back. And so you've got to really be heads up in terms of trying to understand all the different ways that injury is now going to ripple through that person's life or through the life of the family as well.
Correct. In most litigated matters, personal injury matters, once the claim is resolved either by a jury trial or by a settlement, that is the case is over with at that time, and you can't go back in and say, well, I didn't anticipate having this surgery in the future that now I'm going to have, and so I should be able to go back in and get more money from Farm Bureau Insurance Company or State Farm Insurance Company. It doesn't work that way. Once the claim's over with, it is over with, and you can't go back in. There is an exception to that in the personal injury field, and that is workers' comp. In a workers' compensation claim, you can settle a case with future medical left open, and in fact, it's very rare that I don't resolve a claim either by judge's decision or settlement that does not leave future medical open for my client, especially when you're talking about those type of injuries, because when you have someone who is paralyzed, then their wheelchairs wear out over time and they got to be replaced. Accessible vehicles will wear out over time and have to be replaced. Individuals who have amputations, if it's an amputation where they have a prosthetic, the prosthetic will wear out over time and have to be replaced. And depending, and there's no set time period on how long those types of durable medical equipment and those types of devices are going to last. And so, one person who may be a little more sedentary may get a longer life out of their prosthetic, whereas someone who's more active may get shorter life out of it. So having in the workers' comp field, one of the benefits, your damages in workers' comp are much lower than what you're going to get in a car wreck case or another type of personal injury case, because you do not get pain and suffering under workers' comp in Kentucky. But one of the benefits of the workers' compensation system is that future medical treatment and with those type of injuries, even they changed the law in 2018 to limit medical for most injuries to 15 years with the potential for going longer than that. But with amputations and paralysis and things of that nature, the medical continues for life even under the new law.
Even under, okay, so that was kind of allowed or accepted, if you will.
Yes, if you're totally disabled, and then certain specific injuries, are automatic lifetime medical for those.
Right, and you mentioned the durable medical equipment, the wheelchairs and the other things that someone is going to have to use and count on going forward, and how those can deteriorate and basically break over time. There's also the breakdown of the body. My dad was in an accident, was paralyzed from the waist down, so he was in a wheelchair, but it causes other medical problems to the person, not just the equipment around him or her, but it's also, so there are going to be future surgeries. There are going to be ongoing rehabilitations and things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, obviously, and every individual is going to be different, but when you've had those type of injuries, then you're going to wear out other parts of your body quicker. If you're, some people who are paralyzed are, they're 100%. I'm going to use a wheelchair that I turn the wheels instead of using the mechanical wheelchair, and you're going to wear out your shoulders,
rotator cuff, or just muscle tears.
Yeah, and then with those type of injuries as well, you have the individuals can have urinary tract infections repeatedly, unfortunately, there, and other issues, lung issues, and things of that nature that can develop from that. And I'm an attorney, I'm not a doctor, so I do try to rely on doctors for all of that, but having the experiences you talked about in having represented people in the past, knowing what kind of problems that they have, I at least know the questions to ask the doctors from that perspective. And that's one of the things that is beneficial is knowing what questions to ask the doctor, so that we can make sure that all the future medical issues are being taken care of, and then getting the right experts. As I mentioned earlier, the life care planner that I use probably has seen more people with those severe injuries than I have, and evaluated those cases than I have.
That's what they do every day.
Because you get the life care planner in the cases where you have those very, very serious injuries that are going to require future medical treatment going into the future. And that's what their job is to keep up to date with all of that stuff.
Can you kind of walk us through what are some of the things that individual is looking at as they evaluate life going forward for your client? What does a life care planner really look for? Or try to bring to the table, I guess.
One of the things, obviously, they'll look at the medical records to make sure they have the injuries down and understand what the injuries are. They always talk with my clients and to get the personal problems that my client is having, because there are certain problems that most people with that type of injury are going to have, but every individual is different. So my client may have something different going on than somebody else. So they will always talk to my client to find out the difficulties they're having from that, and then talk to the treating doctors. And I've had some even reach out to super specialists, so to speak, to address some issues there, and to make sure they can document what problems this person's going to face, and then they will look at the medical treatments used to treat those kind of conditions and the lifespan of durable medical equipment. One person may get 5 years out of a wheelchair, someone else gets 7, but they kind of do an average over what the average person or the average wheelchair lasts, and then the type of chair that the person best suits the person, because there are differences from those perspectives, and then project that cost out over the lifespan, because it can be, it could be someone that become paralyzed as a teenager, or and then someone who becomes paralyzed as when they're 50 years old, and I've represented both. Well, obviously, the teenager's future medical costs are going to be substantially greater than the 50-year-olds, because the lifespan is substantially greater.
That makes sense, and I would think in a lot of these situations for the client, the injured victim, there maybe some counseling or therapy to deal with the depression and maybe a PTSD type effect also should be factored in there. Are those things that you also deal with when you're looking at the value of that claim and litigating for that?
Well, yes, you look at that in valuing the claim. That's something that also should be looked at. Frankly, from my perspective, the attorney should be looking at that even while the case is ongoing. When you have those significant of injuries, and we've talked before in other podcasts, and I think probably in some blogs, about maximum medical improvement, and that I don't try to resolve a claim until my client's at maximum medical improvement. Well, it's someone who has those significant of an injuries, the maximum medical improvement is going to be well down the road for that individual. And the psychological effects of the injury of being, suddenly paralyzed or suddenly become an amputee, that is affecting them pretty soon, long before maximum medical improvement.
They're dealing with that today.
They're dealing with that today. So normally I will at least strongly encourage my clients to seek out help from a psychologist or mental health professional fairly early on, when we know that it's going to be that severe of an injury early on in that process. And even sometimes when the injury may not be as severe, but it's a career-ending, a life-altering injury for an individual, having them seek out a mental health professional to deal with the change in their life and what their new normal is. And that doesn't change the fact that the person is paralyzed or the person's had a life-altering injury, but it can make a significant difference on their quality of life going forward, and how their mental outlook on life is from that standpoint going forward, and also, frankly, on their family.
Well, I would think there's going to be a tremendous amount of frustration and, in some cases, anger. Because, again, maybe I didn't do anything wrong. Now I have to deal with it. I'm forced to deal with this. I'm going to deal with this for the rest of my life. And that may be, again, diminished earnings capacity, or not able to work at all. That may be a loss of a limb. That may be, I'm not able to provide for my family. I mean, all of that pressure and stress has got to be wrapped up in that person. And just, that's got to come into the factor, into the calculations and into the situation.
It does. It comes into play there. And just like I said earlier, I'm not a doctor.
Sure.
And so I rely on the doctors. I rely on the mental health professionals. But I do, after doing this as many years as I have and talking to a lot of people, I truly think that individuals who have these life-altering injuries should and do go through a grieving process. And it's not the same as losing a loved one, but you've lost a significant portion of your life, and I think that grieving process occurs in that setting, and the mental health professional can help people through that process from that perspective, and then the anger aspect can definitely comes into play. In some of these situations, and where it also come into play is with family members. So and when you're representing someone that's had these types of injuries, you have to remember, at least in my opinion, the attorney needs to remember that it's not just the individual client's life that they are dealing with; they are dealing with the family members. I've had conversations with a father whose daughter was a quadriplegic from the case, and frankly, I think the father was, from a car wreck, and I think the father was much more angry than the daughter was. And I mean, she was the one who was quadriplegic from the wreck, and frankly, she probably was in the process of dealing with just her new normal and didn't have time to be angry. That very well could be the process of it. But the father was extremely angry in that, and dealing with and that was affecting her. And he didn't realize it, I don't think, and certainly would not have if he had of. But that, I think that can have a major effect on it in the wife or the husband. When someone has a life-altering injury, it affects them as well. And while they may not have a claim, dealing with that family dynamic, it can help the client a great deal in that regard, but it also helps the entire family dynamic. And while my goal is to represent that client and obtain the best result I can in the litigation for my client, I think also my goal is to make sure my clients get the best medical treatment they can get for their injuries, and to take care of all other aspects of what I can help with in that regard there. So if, it may be mental health treatment for a family member that they need to be getting there to help deal with the life-changing injury that their loved one has received.
Well, Jeff, I've had the opportunity to speak with a number of your clients. Actually, we've done some work in securing some testimonials, and some of those are available on YouTube or Facebook. And that note of compassion always seems to come through, and that's what you were talking about. Dealing with the family as well as the injured victim there. That theme of Jeff Roberts has a tremendous amount of compassion really comes through, and I think that affects how you address these cases and these difficult situations. So I want to congratulate you on that.
Well, I don't. I hope everybody has that kind of compassion, and I hope all attorneys have that kind of compassion for their clients and for their clients' family members from there. And the golden rule of doing unto others as you would want to have them do unto you. I won't say I always live up to that standard, but I do. That is a standard I try to abide by and try to live up to. And if I were in that situation, I would hope that someone that was assisting me in that situation would also, would be looking out for not only my interest but my family's interest as well.
Yeah, Jeff, let me segue into an area here that we really haven't discussed before on podcasts or blogs, but we talked about the.
Now you're going to try to catch me off guard, aren't you?
Well, it's when you talk about the depression, the anxiety that someone's going to experience, especially somebody that's got now either dealing with paralysis or dealing with the loss of use of a limb. Sometimes substance abuse creeps into the picture, and I know you also do Social Security disability work. And obviously, if illicit substances are involved, that can torpedo a case very quickly. How does it impact the case when suddenly a normal, healthy, happy person who goes through a tragic event like this kind of dips into that area where suddenly drug use is coming into play? Does it impact their benefits in certain ways? Is that ever brought to the table?
It certainly is brought to the table at times. It comes back to each case is its own case, and you have to deal with each case. And what I see probably more frequently than illicit substances is in abuse of prescribed substances.
Yeah. Oxycodone or something like that.
Opioid pain medication, and it has its place, it has its benefits, but it can be overprescribed by certain doctors, and it can be overprescribed to individuals. I've had clients that have been on an opioid pain medication, and family members for that matter, that have been on that were on opioid pain medications for 10 plus years.
Wow.
And the medication just keeps increasing. The dosage goes up, or they change it to something.
The tolerance builds.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You'll build up a certain tolerance to the medications, and my viewpoint is those medications certainly have their place. If you have a significant injury or back surgery or something like that, you're going to have a pain medication after that for a period of time. My experience more recently has been that when individuals who have been on the pain medications for a long period of time, when you can get them to wean off of that medication, that their quality of life will improve. Even though they may be in a little bit more pain, they actually are able to function somewhat better from that standpoint. And I've had conversations with clients that have come back in on some that I didn't even handle the original workers' compensation claim, but they will come back in and sit down, and there'd be a medical fee dispute over some medications, and I have a talk with them, and I've told clients before that you've been on this for a long, long time. Let's try to wean off of it or wean it down and see if you can do without the medication. In 6 months, it's going to be, 6 months may be, excuse the language, but may be hell. But then it may get better, and let's see. And I've had some clients listen to me, and I've had some clients say, if that's your viewpoint, I'll go to somebody else, and that's fine. They're entitled to the attorney that they think is going to do them the best job. And from my standpoint, as I said, I try to be honest with my clients and tell them where I think the case, what's best, I think, for them. And so you get into a real sticky situation sometimes in those kind of cases. But
can they ever experience or be at risk of a loss of medical benefits due to substance abuse? Does that come into play in some of these cases? I don't know. I don't know if it does or not. I'm curious, to be honest.
Well, the best answer for that is no and yes. And the reason I say that is, if you read the law, substance abuse issues is not a basis to find medical treatment, and I'm talking purely workers' comp standpoint right now. But substance abuse issues is not a basis to find some other type of treatment not reasonable and not necessary, so that it's not compensable or not for the work-related injury. So from a purely legal standpoint, if my client has a problem with marijuana or an illicit substance that should not legally bleed over into are they entitled to the prescription pain medication or the injection treatment, steroid injections or something of that nature. As a practical matter, judges are humans.
Right.
And so if they see someone that they think is abusing an illicit substance, they're much more likely to say that person doesn't need the pain medication because they think that that's just feeding into that substance abuse that this individual has. So that's the reason I say no and yes in that regard. From a purely reading the case law, reading the statutes, no, it doesn't have a bearing on it. From a practical standpoint, it very well could have a bearing on it. And frankly, if I were the judge deciding the case, it probably would have a bearing on it to me in that regard. But it depends on the individual. There, I've had a situation where a gentleman who had taken pain medication for a long period of time, and the doctor. Because we had the conversation with the doctor, and the doctor testified in his deposition that when they were fighting the treatment, and the defense attorney said, our doctor says he's addicted to it, and the treating doctor said, I would agree with that, which took me by surprise when he said that, and took the defense attorney by surprise, and the defense attorney asked him, why are you prescribing it for him? And he said, first off, I limit him very on what he can have very strictly, and he knows that if he exceeds that, he's not getting another prescription from me. He has a wife, he has 3 kids at home, and this medication lets him work and provide for his family instead of being on welfare. And he'd rather work, and he'd rather take this medication and work, and he can't work without the medication because of the pain he has, because of the injury that he had in that regard. And actually, in that case, the judge essentially told the insurance company, said, this doctor was honest with me, and I think
it's a logical argument.
Yeah, he said, this doctor was honest with me. You can pay for the pain medication so he can work, or you can pay him permanent total disability benefits. Your choice. and that's so. And that was so. As I said, the pain medications can be beneficial at times in there. They can be overprescribed and are overprescribed by certain doctors. And, that's one thing that I never tell a client what doctor to see for treatment. I leave that in the client's control. But if I see a client treating with a doctor that's doing something that's outside of what I'm used to seeing for that type of injury, or they're prescribing my client 5 Lortab 15s a day for a finger injury that, a cut on the finger or something, and we're 8 weeks after that injury, and he's still prescribing that type of pain medication.
Something that just doesn't pass the sniff test.
Exactly. I have told clients, I said, you might want to get a second opinion. And
for your own good.
Yeah, for your own good. You might want to get a second opinion on, and it's not just on pain medicine. It could be on, if I've got somebody's recommending surgery for a client, and I think that might not be the best treatment for this. From what I've seen from other folks, again, I'm not a doctor. I don't try to play a doctor for my clients, but I say, you might want to go, you might want to get a second opinion before you undergo that, before you have that surgery. And the client ultimately makes the final say in that regard. But that is, I think that is part of the role of the attorney that represents clients in these, is to not only make sure the workers' comp claim is proceeding the way it should, but also to not manage their treatment, but to monitor treatment and make sure they don't get damaged worse than by some sort of treatment that they may not need.
Exactly. Well, Jeff, it's been a sensitive conversation because, again, nobody wishes this on anybody else, and especially when it's a situation that doesn't just heal and get better over time. It is literally an amputation or a loss of limb, or even a paralysis situation. I mean, it's a different kind of circumstance that you have to deal with and help the family and help the victim, to the best of your ability anyway. But I do appreciate it. I've had the opportunity to sit in front of many of your clients and listen to how they talk about you and the way you handle the case and the way you speak to them about the facts of the case. And it's rewarding to know that you're here, you're available to do that, and you're willing to do that. It's just it's refreshing to hear. So, Jeff, I know you're busy. I really appreciate your time, and we'll be back here in about 2 weeks. So all the best.
Good seeing you again, Jim.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.